Hey, squash community. Hope everyone out there is doing really well. I am so delighted to have Laura Massaro on the Squash Mind podcast series today. We had to split this into two parts. There was just so much we had to talk about, so many different avenues and topics and theories around the mind. And to be able to have someone as mindful and as deep thinking as Laura on the show today and in these two parts is just an absolute treat and an absolute honor for me. A lot of people I work with, a lot of the juniors really look up to Laura, really admire her, and are trying to take leaves out of her book. And, arguably she's one of the greatest British squash players of all time. Her CV is just phenomenal, fantastic, and what she's actually doing in her work now is just super inspiring as well. I just love having these chats with her. We have connected quite a lot over these chats and talked a whole bunch of different ways about the mindset, what things work for her, what deep dives she took in her career, how much she paid attention to the mind and working on it. So I think you're going to take a lot out of these two chats. And the reason we split it into two parts is there were so many topics that got covered in part one, which were good, insightful, and we went down a few little rabbit holes with them. But as we finished, we discussed that actually we didn't go as deep as we wanted. So we made it our mission to get on for a second recording and to take some of the key bits that she enjoyed talking about in the first part and to take a much deeper dive into the second part. So please do listen to them back to back if you can. I think you will find them linked really well, really insightful. And as I said, we cover some of the topics in part one, but we take that huge deep dive into part two. So a quick little CV for Laura. She became the world number one in January 2016. She also won the British Open in 2012, becoming the first British male or female to win the title since 1991. So quite an achievement there. She became world champion in 2013 and also the first English woman ever to hold a world title and the British Open title. So yet again, another big feather in her cap in regard to her CV and her achievements. She is a three-time silver medalist at the Commonwealth Games and she got given the MBE in the 2020 New Year's Honours. So those of you who haven't come across Laura in the squash world, where have you been? First of all, I'm sure most of you have. And secondly, hopefully this really highlights a bit of her personal side, a bit of the side that you may not get to see if you just watch the matches and follow the tournaments and see her results. I think it really highlights some amazing things about her as a person, her deep thinking, her relationship with her husband, Danny Massaro, and the way they talk about the mind. And he's very big on mindset. And I'm lucky enough to have him on the Squash Mind podcast series as well. And we've had a couple of really good chats. So this part one covers a wide range. We do take some deep dives into the nature nurture debate. Are you born with mental toughness? Do you grow it? What environment are you in to be able to grow it? Talking about her influences in regard to her coaches that she's had throughout the years and what they brought to the party. Talking a bit about her mindfulness and what she does for her mind and how to have a bit of a softer approach in regard to how she approaches things. So I think it's going to be super insightful. We go into a little bit of detail about her book, but we go a lot deeper in part two. So hope you enjoy part one. I, for one, have really enjoyed these two parts chatting with Laura Massaro. They are relatively deep and long, but I think that's good because that colors exactly what we want to do and really talk about the mind. So welcome to part one of my chat with Laura Massaro. Laura Massaro, welcome to the next episode of the Squash Mind podcast series. How are you getting on?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. So, I've been really feel honored and chuffed to be able to reach out to players like yourself, some of the highest performing players in the world, to be able to get this access and have this type of chat on this platform. And so thanks for your time. It is just, I come away from these things feeling so motivated and inspired and rushing off to do new things. But where to start? I looking back at your career, completely, it's such a glitching career, so many titles, and not only titles. What I found interesting when I was doing a bit more research on your career, the ability to bounce back from setbacks as well. So, it's quite good to play from in front and have the confidence, but it seemed like you were able to bounce back quite a lot. But I'm keen to explore how much your mentality and mindset contributed to your success and what you did as a junior, what sport you did, what environment you were growing up in, and if you could reflect back as a youngster, how do you think this shaped your glittering career that you had?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the old argument, isn't it? Nature versus nurture, and who knows? There's far more intelligent people than me that will come up with arguments on both sides, but I like to think it's both, I guess.
Mhm.
I grew up in a fairly strict household, I'd say. Particularly my dad was strict. My mum was definitely a more loving one, more soft, which I think was a great balance. And I think, they divorced and separated when I was younger. So they would even say that now, that, growing up, I've got a little bit of both my parents for sure. Definitely the loving side and softer side from my mum, and definitely the steely determined kind of professional, orderly side from my dad. My dad was from an army background, so relatively strict. You know, little things like, you get what you earn. His motto was, you get out of life what you put in. We got that drilled into us when we were young. We always had to help around the house. There was always chores to do. He expected nothing less than full effort, and it didn't go down well if that wasn't happening. He expected kind of, training and practice in return for giving up his weekends and his money, for playing the sport that I wanted to play. And yeah, I think it really instilled a lot of discipline in me. I think it was, and when I say a little bit more around the nature side, I think it was in me, because my dad will say to this day that he brought me and my brother up identically almost. My brother's 3 years younger than me, and he was hard and he was tough on me, and he went down the same route with my brother and thought, if
Mm.
I'm a girl and I can handle it, then he can handle it as a boy. And
Right.
he just rebelled, basically. It wasn't, I don't think that it was that he couldn't handle it. I think it was just he didn't want it. He didn't want to put himself through this professionalism. He didn't want to be training every night. He just didn't want to do it. And
Right.
so it was just really interesting how they brought us up the same, and we didn't end up the same.
Yeah, it's almost like a social experiment there, isn't it? Going, right, we're going to
In
use this model.
hindsight.
And I think I think it's in Bounce, or maybe it's in Outliers, about um, a guy who basically married. He was obsessed with chess, and he wanted to bring up players or his kids in a chess environment. And he married someone, and he had 4 daughters. It's the famous story of the 4 daughters. And yeah, he treated each one of them the same, in the same routine. And yeah, they all slightly diverged the path. So it was almost like an experiment saying, hey, the environment is exactly the same, but it's people's characters and natures that might push them off in different paths. But just want
Yeah.
to explore that a little bit more. Was there any pushback from yourself? Was there any not resentment, but was there any part of you at certain points were going, hey, this is too much? Like I'm not into it? Because it sounds like that's what happened with your brother. Where were you at in regard to that?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit in terms of internal turmoil, at times, to the point where I would be, kind of doing my homework. My dad would pop his head in, you come into the gym, we're going to the gym. No, I've got homework to do. And then that he would close the door and have this inner turmoil of guilt, perhaps,
Okay.
expectation, levels within myself that were expected of me, levels of what my dad expected of me. And before I knew it, I was packing my bag and off I was just going to the gym. So it was a lot of that, I think. And that's where I just wonder how much of that was my dad and how much of it was me, because there was a
Mm.
lot of, my brother didn't have that. My brother didn't have any guilt. It was like, nah, dad, I'm not coming. And he didn't go. Whereas I just seemed to go, pack my bag and found myself at the gym. And
That's
I
brilliant.
think there was a little bit of inner turmoil that was going on, like, that kind of, oh, should I go? Should I not? You should go. The little devil on my shoulder going, you should go to the gym. So I guess there was that, but overall, I wanted to do what I was doing. And don't get me wrong, I think because I was a good junior, particularly from probably under 14s onwards. It helps when you're winning. It helps when you're, occasionally losing tough matches and trying to beat those girls that are on that age group ahead of you slightly, and you want to chase them. It gave me a target to aim for. And so I think the fact that I wanted to keep winning and I wanted to catch the people who were beating me also drove that a lot. So, I don't know how much that played in kind of having that winning attitude as well.
Sure. It sounds like you had a great little sweet spot where you got used to winning, because that's a very important trait. And the people I've interviewed and when I've done research on it, you've got to learn to win. You don't want to be, continually being beaten up. But equally so, it also sounded like there was a bit of a stretch, because you don't want to be winning without that challenge along the way. Because when you go into the big world and the big ponds, all of a sudden it's a lot tougher out there. But it sounds like you really hit a sweet spot. And I'm curious to know, what other sports did you play as a youngster? Was it when did you really focus on squash, or did you feel that other sports lent to squash? Can you reflect back on that for me, please?
Yeah, I mean, definitely with your first question, that sweet spot was there probably because of the strength and depth within the junior girls game at that time. So I was always reaching up for the next level, and then also getting like nibbled at on my heels from the girls below.
Right.
So always wanting to stretch onwards. And that started through, when I was 10, 11, I wanted to be the best in Lancashire. And then we sort of, ventured across to Yorkshire, wanted to try and be the best in the north. Like the Yorkshire girls were always so strong. And then obviously you start to become the best in the north. And I ventured down south, and I'd go down south thinking I was the big I am and get my ass kicked, and go back, by Alison or Tina Ricks or someone, before, when you were maybe like 12, 13, come back up, tail between your legs, So it was always kind of trying to stretch, and I always went there. They never came here. I mean, I guess why would they? Because they were the best at, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we were always traveling down, and that was hard too, that discipline and wanting to kind of try and make the most of it. And then in terms of other sports, I played every sport at school that I could, really. Obviously, sporty, you're good. It's the best lesson of the day. PE. So I basically played every lesson that I could. Netball, hockey, cross country, did everything. Plus one club outside of school, and squash, Chorley Marlins, till
Nice.
I was about 13. And then kind of, swimming gets serious quick, and you have to start early mornings. So that didn't go on, but yeah, decent swimmer, and, feeling quite good for that. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like, well, that's two really great points you put there, and for me that sounds so much about the environment, isn't it? You are growing your confidence in Lancashire, getting better, come
Yeah.
down, as I said, get a bit of a whipping from the Southerners, and go back and grow again. So that was obviously a tournament, match play, competitive environment, and then like all the other sports, and it's very rare that this idea of early specialization. You hear you might have come across the Tiger Woods, Roger Federer story. You got Tiger Woods, who specialized early, and Roger Federer, who was a bit more of a range, but also got to right to the top of it. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of people like the narrative, and especially parents like that narrative of early specialization. They go, oh yeah, at 3 years old, you need to be dedicating to this sport and really going deep with it. But the more I've looked at it, and I think you might be in the same mindset, you can actually borrow from different sports and experiences, how team sports bring in a different mindset. Do you think that was also a contributing factor to some of your mental toughness later on in your career?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think also it makes you really realize what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I really enjoyed playing team sports, but I got really frustrated when, I could have a good match and we could lose, or we could win and I'd have a poor match, or one of
Yeah.
my teammates wasn't working as hard as what what you think come on, put a bit of training in, when someone lets you down. And some people are great at that. They want to kind of, be in the fold, and they want to have teammates to bounce off, and they want to kind of do it as a team and win together, lose together, did that. And I get that, but that wasn't for me. That wasn't something that I really wanted and thought that was the way to go. So I think it made me realize an individual sport was for me. And I absolutely agree that, you know, when you get these early specializations, there's almost something a little bit lacking within the bodily functions and skills within your own body. And
Mm.
let's be honest, Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, they're special. They're your kind of Nicole Davids, aren't they, of the world, and things like that. So it's really tough, and I think that it's hard to know that and things like that.
So one really interesting part that I'm trying to develop with my players is this idea of habits, routines, behaviors. And I'd like to ask, what habits, routines, and behaviors have you built up over the years that you felt contributed to your really good mental success as a player?
Oh, that's a tough one, I guess. I love I love to think about that kind of, you know, doing what you said long after the feeling has, the mood that you said it in has left you, is a big thing.
Wow,
And
sounds awesome.
I've always sort of thought that part of one of my talents as such, if, you know, you've got Noor El Shabini who can, you know, is talented with the racket. I always thought that one of my talents was doing that, sticking to what I said I'd do long after the mood I said it in had
Okay.
gone.
Can
Um,
you give an example of that, or explain a little bit more? Because I love the way you put it, and it'll be really interesting to know if there's anything that comes to mind when you say that.
just mainly when you talk about routines, being able to stick to a routine day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year.
Mhm.
You know, even towards the end of my career, when I was working with Mark Campbell, and he used to send his programs through really kind of prescribed, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I'd have, you know, Monday to Sunday, and it was all written down, every little thing. And he used to get actually a little bit annoyed with me that I looked at him too much a little bit, and we had a little tussle for a while of like, you know, Laura, you're a squash player, like, you know, kind of, you've got to lead that bit and da, da, da. But I loved it, and that's where I'm not sure how much that was in me as a talent, because I know other players would go crazy with that. They would go crazy with the fact that every single kind of minute of the session was prescribed. But I lost myself in it, and I would get up and I would like, no, I'm there today, I'm there, and I was organized and planned. And, you know, people would always be like, you know, if I message them 2 days before for a hit, they're like, what's happened? Are you like, why are you so disorganized? Or when I'd first message someone and say, can you play a week in, or, you know, 10 days time, they'd be like, I've got no idea what I'm doing then. Whereas I like to have it all planned. I didn't want to miss an opportunity to hit with someone or train with someone because I hadn't booked it in.
Mm.
So yeah, just being able to stick to it. I
And
got a lot of good feelings.
where do you think that came from, out of interest? Because obviously, with someone like Mark prescribing it to you, great. But was there something part of your upbringing? Obviously, your dad in the army. Were you quite obsessed? Might not be the right word, but were you quite obsessed with writing your program as well, or was it more from external influences? Do you think?
No, I think it was probably me. I like numbers, and I like measurements. I like to have a plan and to spend my time well. I like to know what I've got coming up, what I've got planned in, what I'm doing for the rest of the week, and I like to schedule things in. And there was probably a real good period of time when you talk about the mental side where I had to work on that a little bit, had to soften around the edges and not become too restrictive, because at the end of the day, squash is a game, and you have to be adaptable, and you have to be able to change on the spot when someone changes on you in a game plan, or you have to be able to kind of go on court with a game plan and be able to change that in the moment if it's not working, or if someone changes something, or you find out they're not moving to the forehand front corner, but it wasn't in the game plan to hit the forehand front corner. So it was something I had to work on it, and also that attitude of coming back of, I've done A, B, and C brilliantly. I've stuck to it. I now deserve this because of that.
Okay.
And that's not how sport works. And I'm sure you've heard that so much from people of like, I've put all this effort in, and I've trained, and I've done this, and I've done that, and I deserve more. And there was a huge part, you know, probably through my mid-20s where I had to drop it and be like, you know, just because I'm not, just because I'm doing everything, arguably in my head better than people who are higher ranked than me doesn't mean I deserve what they get. And
Right.
I had to relax around that a lot. And it
Yeah.
was a big learning curve.
That's brilliant to hear, because yeah, you do hear of athletes you have like yourself really sticking to their guns and really putting their effort in and looking back at their training diaries. And yeah, the whole entitlement is maybe not the right word, but you use the word deserve, like you think you
Yeah.
deserve to get that result. And can you explain how you then soften? Did you do things? What was it, more visualizations? Did you have a more of an acceptance attitude to things? Can you explain how you put in all that effort but then had to soften?
I mean, just talking about it helps. The one thing that I think is huge and has been huge for me is honesty, communication, when it comes to not only honesty with the people around me, but honesty with myself. It's a huge thing when it comes, particularly to an individual sport. And I don't think people and players are anywhere near as honest as they could be. They're not as honest about what happened in that game, what let them down, what didn't let them down. The coaches around people are generally not honest enough, either because they're worried about the personal relationship with the player, how it will upset the player's feelings, not wanting to damage confidence.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it comes firstly from honesty within yourself and being able to talk about that. And while I've always been open to psychological development, brain development, and mental control, making myself better on the mental side, you have that. What comes with that is an ability to say when things aren't going well and when things aren't working brilliantly for you. And I think probably a conversation that sticks out the most is just talking to Danny about it, and him recognizing that in me perhaps before I recognized it in myself,
Mhm.
where he would go, I'd have a great training session, great training block, maybe not get the result I wanted and come back and just be in a filthy mood because I haven't got my own way. And
Yeah.
that's where he would just be like, why do you deserve that? You can't just do the work over here and expect it to happen over here. You have
Mhm.
to work on the link between it, working on it here and expecting it to happen. There's a bridge, like a link to each situation, that it isn't just do that, get this. It's how do you get that to get to that? And that's where I started to realize, like, it's even when I was at the very, very top, you can't just go on court and expect it to happen. You have to respect your opponent. You have to set out a game plan and you have to make it happen, because the work over there has to be made to happen in the actual match there, if that makes sense.
Completely, honestly, like hearing you say that, thank you for sharing, because that the way you put it, and hearing from a world-class performer like yourself, the transferability of that workload and mindset into that performance, yeah, there's that bridging gap. And but that leads me really nicely onto what I wanted to explore a little bit with your I suppose your two coaches in your career, DP David Pearson and then Danny, your husband. Firstly, before I ask the question, were those your main two coaches throughout your career, would you say?
um no. And I guess that links in a little bit to the mental side again, that mindset of realizing when something was good for me, when it had maybe reached the end point, the having the strength and the backbone to move on, to seek out things that I knew and felt like I deserved. So I was originally coached, obviously, as all people are, by brilliant club players when I first started off. Great coaches that are still doing the grassroots stuff today, but mainly probably from the age of around 12, Annette Pillin,
Yes.
from 12 to 21. Which was, I mean, you can't get to 21 and kind of 21 years old and be at the place I was then and not put a heck of a lot of that down to her and what she was doing. And I obviously met Danny when I was 18, and he definitely got more involved probably from the end of that relationship with Annette. So
Okay.
from more definite an influence from obviously 18, but as it got more serious, and then obviously we got married at about 22, I think I was. So it definitely helped with that transition. I left Annette and started working with Nigel Willis for a couple of years, who's a great local player, really skillful, and actually built, I didn't know it at the time, but built his game on the back of DP and his like understanding of playing that sort of era of squash with DP. Then moved from Nigel to work with Nick Taylor. Nick Taylor then moved to Jersey, and so that unfortunately came to an end. And I worked with Phil Whitlock for 2 years, and he helped me get from, kind of like 7, 8 in the world to 2, 3 in the world, which was huge at that time. And this is where that honesty comes in, because honestly, if Phil had coached me when I was maybe young, I don't think it would have worked. I left Phil after 2 years because, and I've told him this, like I didn't actually believe that doing what I was doing at that time was going to get me to beat Nicole, to get to world number 1. And that's what I wanted. And I didn't want to leave. I wanted to work with DP at the same time and work on that different side of my game. But unfortunately, that relationship broke down. So then from there, only started working with DP really in about 2013, back end of 2012 and stuff. And Danny's obviously been there, the whole time.
Yeah. That's a fascinating timeline that you've just gone through, and yeah, I think the little bits I've heard from DP, he gave a great thing on Squash Skills once. He talked about, coaches, the relationship between a coach and a player is so important, that you can have these open, honest discussions and you can get them. I think he alluded to the fact that I'm maybe hashing his words a bit, but he felt like the mothership, and he said actually players going and getting advice from other coaches or other sources was no problem. But, when you create a good relationship with someone, you come back to that mothership a little bit. And I quite like the way he said that. And yeah, me as a coach reflecting on what he says, end of the day, it's not about the coach, it's about the player. And I think a lot of coaches sometimes get a little bit maybe insecure if their players go off and see other players or other coaches and come back. But I think when you create that strong relationship, that's really powerful. And no, thank you for explaining that timeline. And I suppose linked to that a little bit, maybe Danny was a big part of this, but who do you think brought the mental side to the table the most for you? So because you are classed as one of the most mentally tough performers in your career, in the sport and what you've produced, who do you think was a massive contributor to that over the years?
I mean, it's just something that I've, like I said earlier, kind of something that I've always thought about. I always thought about the mental side of the game as being something that can be improved upon and worked upon. I thought of it like, well, why would you strengthen your body and not strengthen your mind? So I think I led a lot of it, if I'm honest. Okay. But you need to have the people around you who are also open to that as well. And like DP, DP, I say that DP only coached me from 2013, but we had our first ever session together probably at about the age of 14 or 15, because obviously he was national coach. There was always an underlying tone of what he expected from the players on the England squash system. Annette was an England coach at the time. She was underneath that, like filtered down stuff that was happening from that high end. And DP led from above. He isn't massively big on the mental side, but he's not big on the physical side either. In fact, he's not big on anything that's not squash. That's great because, I don't feel like we were necessarily encouraged. I don't think we were necessarily discouraged either. I think it became down to personal belief on whether or not this was something that you wanted to be good at and improve at. And of course, the setup was set up in a way that, we went off in 2001 to our World Juniors with a psychologist. So on some level, England squash are encouraging psychological work from an early age. And I just felt, I remembered Kirsten Barnes being on those trips with us Europeans, having sessions on national squads, and just feeling like, wow, there's actually something I can do here to improve the craziness that's going on inside my head. I mean, am I the only one who's like got this craziness going on that I can help? And when I say it comes from me from a really early age, I was reading autobiographies. I remember Steve Backley's being the javelin thrower, being one of the first. He had a psychologist. We're talking kind of mid-90s, aren't we, sort of, where I'm starting to really feel like actually the people that I look up to who are winning Olympic gold medals and watching them they're working with psychologists and they're controlling their mind. And if you can do it in an Olympics, for one throw of a javelin, then I can do it over a squash match. So there was always a curiosity there. It always came from me. And then, everybody who knows Danny knows that he's into the psychological side. He's so interested in it. And so, of course, when, we get talking about things like that, it just goes boom, boom, boom. And together we work on it. So in the early kind of part of our relationship, when he comes home one day and goes, I'm going to do an NLP course. Do you want to come and do it with me? I'm like, yeah, I do. Rather than, don't go near the mental side. That's not for me. It's not taboo. It never was taboo for that sort of subject, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it had a few chats with a few other players, and they said similar thing, that there was maybe a taboo at one point. Are you seeing a sports psychologist? You must have a weakness, you must have a flaw in your game. But you looked at it from a completely different point of view, a curiosity. And that word, I'm glad you said that word, because I always pick up on that word. And that's something I think that I'm personally trying to instill in a lot of my players and my juniors is get that curiosity, be curious about your mind, be curious what you can grow away from the squash courts. So that brings me a little bit into when you worked with DP, but by 2013. So you were the first ever English woman to hold the world title and British Open title.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through this period of your career, as arguably this sounds like when everything came together? It sounds like that was your purple patch, your sweet spot, would you say?
Yeah.
And can you reflect back on that year and even with thinking about that world title, winning it, but also holding the British Open at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I would arguably say, as you do, you get these peak years, don't you? And certainly from 2012 was my first World Championship final in the Cayman Islands. Huge deal. 2012 when got to the final, beat Raneem 13-11 in the fifth, I think, in the semi, and it was huge. And probably I was a bit overwhelmed in that final, but that was 2012, and I kind of just finished with Phil at that time and was starting to, kind of in this like in between stage, and then came on board with DP and just bought in straight away. And I think that's what DP, if you asked him, I think what I've heard him say a lot over the years is just, there was just complete buy-in. There's always been complete buy-in with me, whoever I'm working with, whether it's psychology, physical, squash, anything, physio, tell me to do it, it gets done. And that's where it links back into that kind of talent. There's no question. There's positive questioning to try and figure out why I'm doing it. I don't just do it blindly, but I do what I'm told if I believe and I trust in the person. So 2013, obviously unbelievable year, won British Open. No one probably really expected that. And that was good because I went into that final without any pressure. Then obviously World Champs was the delayed World Champs, so I actually won it in 2014, even though it was the 2013 World Champs. And whole different, you want to talk about mental mindset. I mean, I feel sick just thinking about it.
Well, can you explain why? What was going on there?
Oh, and I saved 4 match balls in the quarterfinal. I won the semi-final against Raneem again, back at the hotel, and Shabini beats Nicole. She's still a junior, and I've gone from playing Nicole in my second World Championship final with no pressure in my mind to playing a 17-year-old junior in a final of a World Championships, which is in my mind all mine to lose.
Very different pressure, yeah.
Unbelievable, yeah. And then obviously going through there they were my peak years. So from 2014, won probably my most amount of titles, got to world number 1. January 2016. So from there, obviously coming into those peak years, and it was 2016 January when I went to world number 1. But in actual fact, my winning US Open, Qatar Classic, final of Hong Kong was 2015, and then went to world number 1 in January 2016. So that period between 2012 and probably back end of 2015 were definitely my peak years. And I mean, I'm kind of late 20s, I think, by then, maybe 29, coming into 30. I mean, it's so tough looking back because there is a lot of years, a lot of struggles, a lot of things that have gone well, a lot of things that have gone right, a lot of the feelings of I'm never going to get there. to obviously get into the world number one. I think for me, the World Championships is so special, and it does what it says on the tin. But the world number one, winning those events back to back to finally get that world number one spot, and doing it while Nicole was still in the mix, and Raneem and everybody was so special. And I think mentally totally different thing to holding it together for a world champs, and constant reflection, constant improvement, constantly looking for something to help me get better. And like I said before, always thinking of the mindset of something that can be improved, rather than I've got this mindset that I'm dealt with. I just have to do the training and hope it all holds itself together in the moment. And that's what I see. I think a lot of people who have been scared to do the mental work over the years, it's like, no, I just train hard. I do what, and I just get what I'm given when I go on the court. And I always felt like my mental side could be improved in the same way that I would go and lift weights in the gym. I wasn't lifting weights because I had a weakness in my body. I was lifting it to be stronger and to be better and to be injury free and to be able to hold up match after match. And so that required the same amount of training when it came to the mental side as well.
Yeah, geez, love that. That's an amazing little sweet spot, and thanks for sharing. And I'm quite curious to know, in those matches, and almost getting into a bit of the nitty gritty here, your inner voice, your the thoughts popping around your head, your 4 match balls down in the World Open quarterfinals, getting to number one, having to win back-to-back tournaments. What is your inner voice like? I'm sure you've reflected on it, and I can imagine there's some demons that come in there at certain points. So how do you deal with the demons? What is your inner voice like? Because for me, I'm really curious of that nitty gritty when the pressure's really on.
Yeah, I think the thing to say is that people see me as being really mentally strong coming through matches. There's been a lot of matches that I haven't been mentally strong. I think that there's been a lot of matches where I have been mentally strong as well, and that people are really quick to remember certain matches, and they almost put the label on it for you. You don't have to really necessarily do anything, and it's hard, isn't it? Because from 17 years old to obviously the World Championships as a junior was every 2 years, so I never actually got to play it when I was 18. That match coming back from 2-0 down to win England the title in the decider for the World Juniors, I guess there's you look back now and you go, well, there's something already there, wasn't there? Because I came back from 2-0 down, but my inner voice, I always think from a really early age, has had a bit of a steeliness to it and a determination. And I get really angry at myself sometimes when things are not going well. And then that turns into a determination so rather than an angriness and just a quit, or an angriness of like, I can't think of anything else, for example, the amount of times that I've sort of said in a roundabout way these words, not these exact words, but something around this sort of sentence of, I'm not having it. I'm not having it. And that line just pops in, this, it's not good enough. You're an embarrassment. You are not going down like this. It's like, if I could picture it, it would be like a little Laura stamping her foot on the floor going, no, like throwing her toys out the pram, and something just clicks. And that's what happened at the World Juniors, I think. That's what happens when I'm not playing well, more than anything, not necessarily losing or not, because sometimes I can be losing and playing well and that voice doesn't kick in. But when I'm not playing well and I'm not happy and I'm not satisfied and my brain is scattered and unfocused and unable to concentrate on the things that really matter, that are going to win me the match, it's like, I'm not having it. And World Championship final at, I think something like 8-all, I think, in the fifth, play 4 decent rallies. That's all I ask of you. 4 decent rallies right here, right now. I mean, 8-all in the fifth. Why have I said 4? I've got no idea. I only have to win 3. I'm like planning in my head that I'm probably going to play well for 1 rally and still lose it because it's a World Champs final. So, and then I'm almost counting down. I'm like really, really good at flipping scores in my head, was not always brilliantly at being a front runner, really good at getting myself in a lead and then pretending I'm not. I don't know where that came from. So either, being, kind of being 8-4 up in a fifth or fourth to close it out 3-1, and I'm 8-4 down, just to really focus me in on a plan. And then there's been loads of times where I've just been, kind of really rubbish as well. And that stubbornness doesn't work, and there's no rhyme or reason. And there was a match when I played Raneem in Alexandria, and we'd had an absolute battle, and I thought that normally I could break her mentally or physically at some point by the time we got to about the hour mark, and she just didn't go away. And I had one negative thought, which went, why is she still so strong at this point? And the match went 5 rallies, bang, and I'm out. And I was around the back going, I lost that match because I had that one negative thought. And I think you just try to learn from those situations. And, later found out, obviously, that Raneem was in kind of looking like she might go to world number 1. And it just shows how mentally deep you can push when you've got something so big there.
Yeah, it is, you are probably massively aware of it. It's such a separating factor between the good and the great. You at a certain level, arguably everyone within a few percent technically, physically are close. There's a certain leveling off, but it's that mind, it's that flipping. And it is great to hear how your inner voice speaks to yourself, because it sounds a very authoritarian, very demanding voice, but it doesn't sound like there's a lot of negativity attached. It's a motivational voice at the same time. So it's saying what it is on the tin, and it's going, hey, like, enough, like this is where you're at now, but it's also pushing you forward, because, and you might have had it or not, but obviously that voice, when that flips a little bit into that slight negative side, it can unravel a little bit. And did you work on your inner voice with someone in particular, or how did that process evolve, you think?
I guess the thing to say firstly is that the negative side of my voices was always more before matches.
Okay.
And I think it's important to say that I'm never someone who would go on court and go I'm going to win this match because I'm a better player and because I'm higher ranked, and just because they're rubbish and I'm good. And I think arguably one of my biggest, one of the things I'm so proud of is the fact that I very rarely lost before my seeding, and particularly towards the middle end of my career. And I honestly put that down to giving my opponent 100% respect, because I always worried I could lose, whether I was playing 50, 60 in the world, or whether I was playing, 15 in the world in like a quarterfinal. I was always worried I could lose. And so the positive side of that is that I always gave that opponent 100% respect. And you can't figure out mental strength, determination, figure out your game plan if you've gone on there with a lack of respect for a player, and then you find yourself in trouble on court. You can't rescue it in the moment very often. Sometimes you can, but it's rare, and you need your opponent to help you out a little bit. Whereas if you go on there with massive respect, and then that opponent plays like the level you've set, then you're there, you're set, you're ready, you're prepared for it. But if you haven't prepared for it, it's so hard in the moment to do that. And a lot of that negativity before matches was mainly what I had to deal with. Like I've just described, when I'm on the court and I'm in the heat of the battle, it sort of was never really an issue. The negativity and the negative self-talk and the worry and the doubt and the expectation, that was what was all in the lead up before tournaments. And that was what I worked on the most. And I worked with numerous people over my career, and Kirsten Barnes, who was our first ever psychologist as like going into our World Juniors, she sort of said to me really early on that you're a bit of a positive negative. Okay. You sort of drive away from negativity. So you kind of want to win because you don't want to lose, not because you want to win. And so I always kind of knew that about myself, and that always intrigued me, in that, hold on, so there's a way that you can be here. And that was at like a junior level, 18, 19, and it sort of led me down a path of understanding my personality a lot. And so I worked with a guy on the NLP side who called Peter McNabb, who was also really big into the Enneagram. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like a personality typing, and it's unbelievable, really, and it's not designed for sport. And I got this big thick book and I read up on what my personality type was, and I think the biggest thing that helped me do was understand the reasons behind my behavior, not necessarily why I do the behavior, but the reasons behind it. And so my personality is that when you look at it just from an Enneagram, and it's not all just about the Enneagram, there's so much more. And it rather than boxing me in, it allowed me to be free of like actually understanding myself. And so this personality type that I was about wanting to do things right. And I always want to do things the right way. And I'm not proud of myself if it's not been done the right way, which then links back into following programs and being organized and disciplined. And so kind of understanding that, and this voice. And so with this personality type came a voice of judgment a lot. So I'd understand that if I was being quite judgmental of other people, linking back into having this link of like deserving to do things because I'm better than what they're doing, in a roundabout way, judging that what they're doing is not good enough and what I'm doing is good enough. It was basically understanding that I was probably judging myself quite a lot.
Yeah.
The more fun I can be and the more light I can be and the less I can judge myself and others freed me up to not be so bound by rules and doing things the right way.
That sounds unbelievably powerful, what you discovered at that point. And were you what, 18, 19, or were you a bit older when you came across this idea?
No, I was a little bit older when I started dealing with the Enneagram stuff. But I think the Kirsten stuff at 18, 19, where I'd started to really kind of understand the fact that there was a way to be this, wanting to win, to not fail, yes, was that some people aren't like that, and that there was different personality types and things like that. And then that, obviously doing the NLP course that I did in my early 20s helped me understand that. And that really broke down a lot of barriers about understanding. NLP is crazy because it's nothing to do with sport, but you learn things like phobia cures and how you can manipulate your mind and anchors. And so I was just like, hold on a second, I can get myself an anchor that gives me a feeling when I'm on court. Yeah, I want some of that.
Yeah, like so the more you're speaking there, the more I'm thinking of how we open the door. Coaches, you're a coach now as well, how we open the door to players to see that, to understand their personality types, because I think we all perform at our best when we're playing to our personality and what we like the best. But if you've got a coach saying, no, play this way because I believe this is the right way, but it doesn't align with the personality, you're going to be at loggerheads, aren't you? And it sounds like you really discovered that relatively early on in your career. And it sounds like you would, but would you recommend this type of reading and this investigation to the juniors that you work with?
Yeah, 100%. And the trouble is, and I'm sure it's getting the people to buy in. I'm not going to lie, it's hot, like you're shining a light on an area that you don't want to look at. And I don't know why. I don't know why people don't want to look at it, because, well, I do know why. I do know why. It's because you go in the gym and you just lift a weight and you see your legs get bigger, and you can see it, and it's visual. With the mental side, to figure out what personality type you are, you have to be honest. You have to understand why you do things the way that you do, and you have to understand why you don't want to do things. And towards the end of my career, and this it's all coming out now, towards the end of my career, I started working on a little bit of the hypnosis side. So I saw a guy for a little bit of hypnotherapy. Weirdly enough, kind of links in strangely and really similarly to NLP. Not exactly sure even to this day whether or not I really believe that I was hypnotized. Some weird things happened, I'm not going to lie. But I tell you what, I went in that room for 2 hours every fortnight and bawled my eyes out.
Oh, wow.
Bawled my eyes out. And that is not nice. That's the key. Working mentally is not nice. And that's the thing that you have to get over straight away. Now I know you'll probably argue, like, there's easy things you can do to start: visualization, affirmations, the simple stuff, opening up your mind, reading books, reading psychology books, you're tiptoeing into it. Now, could I have done that hypnosis at 20? Probably not. And I probably didn't have the scars that would make me bawl my eyes out, because I think as you get older, we all go a bit crazy. But I have spoken to a few players, you know, and different people and friends, and I've gone, go and see this guy, it'll help. They don't want to go there. They don't want to go there. It's like a nasty, dark place. And there's something in your personality where you think you have to educate people young that it's okay to go there and shine a light on the things that are not painful. Because if you go and you bawl your eyes out for an hour and you feel like you've been hit with a bus emotionally for the next 2 days, it is hard to get yourself to that office again 2 weeks later. And that's the tough battle, I think, with the mental side as opposed to the gym side.
No, listen, Laura, thank you so much for opening up there and sharing some real insights. You know, people listening, for me, for one, I'm sitting here just absorbing this, and it just your journey and the way you've gone through. And yeah, I think different parts of your life and your adult life and how your brain's changing. You know, you can't force someone to go down this path. But I really like what you say about, you know, when you go to the gym, when you hit a squash ball, you get instant feedback, don't you? You get that feedback pretty much straight away. Working on the mind, it takes time, and you got to delve deep. And like you said, you might even need to go to some dark places and really understand personality traits and why you do things and the reasons behind it. So you shining a light on that has been massively insightful. So yeah, just a real thank you for that, because for me, for one, it's opened my curiosity to go and have a look. I've got a couple of questions from some players that I work with. They were super keen that you were being interviewed, and they're like, no, my goodness, my favorite player. So one of the first questions, I only got two, but I think they're really good ones. This one is probably pertinent for where we're at right now. So player asks, is there any advice for juniors struggling with motivation due to the lack of tournaments and not knowing when they will play next?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's such a tough time. I think ultimately, I mean, looking at it from the mental side, it comes back as well to, why do you play the game? What do you want from the game? Do you want to be the best squash player that you can be, or do you only want to play squash to play tournaments? And I think if you can start to ask yourself some questions around why are you playing the game, what's your long-term vision, it makes you excited for the future. And I think, like, I've spoken to a lot of the players I'm working with. Danny's the same. We've had a lot of conversations, and it's a subtle change of mentality of trying to anticipate your own future rather than waiting for your own future. And that shifts a little bit of your mental side of like excitement, I think. So when you say you're anticipating your own future, you're excited about what can happen and how you can be. And, you know, do you want to step back on the court and look different and play differently and be a slightly different person, an improved version of yourself? Or do you want to just kind of do nothing and just wait until you can go back on the court, and then that you're just waiting for the courts to reopen, which is not exciting at all, and in fact the opposite of exciting. It's boring and painful. So yeah, it obviously depends on kind of what you're working on in your game, but you know, I've been doing a lot of remote calls where you kind of go through a little bit of video analysis. A lot of them, you know, a lot of juniors at the moment haven't even got like an area where they can ghost or do anything, but even just doing sort of lunges, getting movement patterns going, understanding that space around you, understanding your mental side. You know, there's loads of great books out there, and you know, picking up the phone and speaking to someone a bit differently. And I think the key is just getting it down to a fine line of kind of like, what do you want from the sport, and then letting that branch out, and be excited about that anticipation of the courts reopening.
Totally. And you know, I think words are so important and so powerful, and you know, investigating coaching styles and methods, but you use the word anticipation, and how you've used that word and how it completely reframes the whole thing. And you know, you sound like you've spoken with Danny about that. And yeah, for hopefully juniors that are listening, they can really resonate to that, going, yeah, look, we're going to be playing again at some point. let's not look at it like you said, that we're going to play and we'll just wait till we play. It's that anticipation about what you can do. And then the second question, maybe it's a two-part of this one. What short-term goals have you set for yourself? So I'm thinking of that question as maybe currently, where you're at currently, short-term goals, but also maybe, in my opinion, I would like to understand what you maybe did as a player as well, and when you were peaking, when things were going well. What short-term goals did you set for yourself?
Well, I guess short-term goals, like right now during kind of COVID times, and now I'm retired, really simple, kind of try to get out of the house every day. It helps. I've got a dog, so get out in nature, get some fresh air, try to exercise most days. Just I think refreshes your mind. It helps you sleep better at night. Um, and being accepting a little bit of the mood I'm in for the day. Some days I'm so productive. I've got, things lined up, and I've got this going on, and the house is blitzed, and I've got some bacon in the oven, and I'm trying a new recipe for dinner, and it's I've got so much energy. And then other days, like yesterday, just felt like this is rubbish. Just watch TV most of the day. And I did get out with the dog. I was like, come on, get out the house. And that's fine. And I'm not having a go at myself for the fact that some days I'm going to be like that, because I know that I'm going to have other days where I'm a real pick me up. So kind of going with the flow a little bit. Always making sure that I at least work out or get out the house every day, even if I don't want to, because I think it's important for our mindset.
Yep.
But I think being a little bit forgiving and soft at this time is important for your own mental well-being.
Great advice.
And then when I was back playing, I guess short-term goals were just short term is difficult because you're always looking ahead to the next tournament. But I had a really good way of following those plans. So I never really, because I had my week set out, like I explained before, I never really had to look too far ahead. I just got what was done in front of me. And I think that's important. Like Danny and I have spoken a lot as well when I was playing, but also now, about all you can deal with is the moment that you've got right now. And maybe getting through the next hour is the thing to do. And that's the same when you're training. So whether it's a really tough session, you've just got to get through kind of like the next sort of minute, the next rally, the next shot comes back down. It's like almost practicing what you want in a match. Like, can you deal with this rally now, the next rally that's coming up? Can you deal with the next, if you're doing court sprints, I started to try and think, well, if you start thinking about the fact you're tired and you've got another 3 sets to do, you're not going to get through the session, but you can put one foot in front of the other, right?
Nice.
And you can put one foot in front of the other and one foot in front of the other. And before you know it, you've done a length and then 2 lengths and then a set. And that's always like a really, it's really important to keep things a little bit short term like that, and have little mini goals set. So you set yourself a big goal, but then how are you going to get to that big goal? Like, how are you going to get to it in terms of writing down the little goals that are going to help you achieve that you can do things daily? And it doesn't make that big goal seem so big when you've just got to do the little ones that lead to that, hopefully. So that would be what I would say to that.
Totally. To reflect a little bit what you said there, I think the big goal is for you to face in the right direction, but it's all those little process goals, your controllable goals, that get you to then take the steps to that main goal. And I like that idea about facing the right direction with your big goal. But in simple terms, you might not have any control over your big goal. That's an uncontrollable. Winning a world title within reason is uncontrollable, and it's so far out there. But what can you do each little step of the way? And again, I love the part that you say about just putting that one step in front of each other. It's so powerful, that. And the fact that you just actually committed to do it. I think it was Peter Nichols said, when he was right at the peak, and he was almost getting to the point of chronic fatigue and falling asleep on the stairs. I think he had a statement going, the hardest thing about training was tying the shoelaces. So he believed that actually the physical tying of the shoelaces was the hardest bit, because as soon as he tied his shoelaces, he was committed to the session. It was like, I'm doing it now. And I always use that little quote, and I just think it's a real cool one to go, yeah, you know what? You make that commitment, you take that extra step, and it can just go so far in that sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So listen, I've got a few more questions. I'm being really greedy with your time. You've been absolutely amazing so far. I could probably sit and speak for a whole day about this stuff, and there's a whole bunch I haven't asked you. But final few questions, if you got a few moments. One that I'm curious about, and again, this again maybe links to COVID time. What drove you to continue when you had maybe lost motivation and couldn't see progress as quickly as you would have liked? So you maybe alluded it before that, you might have trained and then expected just to play well, but when you've been training, but you haven't seen that, maybe that progress, whether it be physically, whether it be your shots, how would you keep yourself motivated?
Yeah, it's a really good, really tough question. I think you rely a little bit on the people around you to hopefully guide you and make sure that you're on the right path and keep encouraging you a little bit. I used to try and give myself little rewards as well for getting through training sessions and playing practice matches. I think it links into the mental side and that preparation for tournaments where I'd like to think that I was a really good league player and a really good training practice match player,
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't matter to me whether or not I was playing in Grand Central Station or on a backcourt at Chorley. I didn't want to lose. Now I always brought a next level of kind of focus and discipline and will to win when I was on the big stage, but I very rarely lost to, there's a lot of players who never beat me on PSA. They also never beat me in practice either, because I was, really determined. And that came a lot from Phil as well, because he'd tell me stories about a young Nick Taylor that would come and play him and he'd give him 2 points and send him on his way, or no points and then slowly but surely they came back, and you're trying to obviously, get the most out of it. And then I'd also, set myself up on the ball machine a lot, set myself targets. And if I hit targets, I'd buy myself, kind of a treat,
Right.
bit of cake or something. Or, if I wanted a new handbag, I had to hit 20 in a row above a tin without hitting a sidewall or something like that. And I think it's a way, I guess, like what you just said with the Peter Nicol thing, it's a way to get yourself, up for something when you're a bit down. And you're also training the mental side as well, aren't you, when things are not going well. It's really, really nice to go into a shop and buy yourself a reward when you've done something that you don't want to do. And I'm always encouraging, whether it's a new album of, I know it's not so much now, is it, but an album of music, or a new pair of shoes, or a new handbag, or just a small, like, coffee and a cake after. I'm not allowed a coffee and a cake if I don't do this. So just really trying to, motivate yourself in a little bit of a different way.
Nice. Cool. Bringing us into maybe where we're at right now. You've retired. You've got a few real interesting rods in the fire, so to speak. But in the current lockdown, your workouts have been an absolute revelation for the players. The feedback I get from the players I work with, they save your videos, they're going back on them, they really like them. You must be happy with how they've gone, and you obviously enjoying that process of those home workouts.
Yeah, I mean, that's so nice to hear, because you sort of put these things out and go and don't really know whether people are enjoying them or doing them.
Oh, my players are doing a lot of them, so yes, they're loving
Oh,
them.
great. I'll maybe try and do a few more then. I never really know
Oh,
if it's
really? Oh, no.
yeah.
It's part of some of the training programs I'm setting with my players. I go, right, these are maybe the 4 or 5 things I want this week. And they go, oh, but where can I fit Laura's sessions in? And they really enjoy them. So yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah,
The,
been fun for
the,
you.
say that again.
They've been fun for you, I assume, as well.
Yeah, so the England Squash Live Instagram ones that I did were really good fun. Danny had his mixers on, which he's really got into his little bit of DJing during lockdown. So he had a new mix on every week, and he would do them with me. And it was a great way to start our Mondays, noon on a Monday. And I did 6 weeks in a row, and have to think about it, and really tried to do it in a way that it was starting with a little bit more endurance, really going back ready for play with fast feet. And
Mhm.
the thing that I'm really, really into is, and I think I'm probably going to go more and more down this route as I coach, but I'm really into the movement side. I've massively got into understanding, and maybe didn't even realize how much the movement was a big part of my game. When I first started working with DP, he said, you need to have more electricity in your movement. You're a bit slow and a bit sluggish. And I've always been a bit of a powerful kind of like base based player with,
Mm-hmm.
just drive the ball through to the back, get on the volley, and then try and play the simple drop. And movement was something that always let me down. And particularly when I was nervous, I would, get real heavy in my movements and be sluggish and slow. And that was what he helped me with. And so now I'm working with players, particularly the girls, and we're on a low tin. I think the boys as well, it gets covered up a lot because of the speed and athleticism of the boys, but the efficiency of movement and holding that together over the course of a match, but then into the next round and the next round. And I used the British Open in 2017 as an example of kind of getting through. I think two Egyptians, Raneem 3-1 in the quarters, 2-0 down and winning 3-2 against Shabini. Honestly, if my movement wasn't as good, I'd have had nothing. I didn't have a lot left in the tank for the final as it was, but I found a way because I sat into my movement. And so you're like, I know you're going, she's gone ridiculously off track here, but
No,
I basically, like, all of my movements that I'm trying to do, I'm trying to come across in my workouts. So I talk a lot about keeping your hips high, making sure your foot goes heel toe. So I hope that that's what's getting across. And I've really enjoyed the fact that during a workout that's a circuit, and it'd probably be a bit of advice to juniors, it'd be, don't give up on the fact that this is to help you squash. So whether you're doing a lunge, a reverse lunge, a side squat, a split squat jump, are you distributing weight well on the front and back foot? Are you getting to know the space around you? Are you anticipating the floor? Are you using the floor to give you some energy back rather than all the energy just sinking into the floor? All of these things that I've become so passionate about. And I think it shows that you can get people with pretty average swings that move well, and they're a lot higher ranked than they should be, rather than a silky smooth swing and someone who doesn't move that well. It's not the same.
yeah.
So obviously you get both movement, swing, you're onto a winner, but
Yeah.
movement for me, and particularly in the women's game and defending the low attacking tin, is so massive.
No, you're totally talking my language there. It's something that as a younger coach, I really looked into it, and I'm still developing the whole movement side. And yeah, just on a personal level, when I moved to the UK from Zimbabwe, yeah, I would think I was lucky enough to play so many different sports that my movement was naturally quite good. I didn't hit the ball very well. I didn't have very good tactics, but I was punching 50, 60, 70 places above my weight on the world rankings because my movement was efficient, light, agile. And yeah, so then, you learn the racket work with it. It then becomes a real powerful combination. And I've personally started to almost address movement. If someone comes to me for a lesson, I go, you know what, the first 3 or 4 lessons, we're going to get your feet going right. Your swing will get there. So yeah, you're definitely speaking my language. And to hear you say that is powerful. And you've almost answered my next question, but it's linked as your coaching career. What lessons would you give to the youngsters knowing what you know now? It sounds like obviously movement's a real high one. But yeah, reflecting back at your career, what lessons do you think you're going to be really trying to pass on to your players?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of what we've spoken about today about not being afraid of the mental side. Already in lockdown, one of my biggest things has been, providing some books to read. And it's tough because you've got to try and match the book with the personality. One book that you'd give to one player it's just not going to work for them, for another player. And I think sort of understanding and exploring the mental side, understanding and exploring your own mental side. And just really buying into the movement and the technique. And I think the one thing I've perhaps realized is, a lot of coaches that I see, they go, get the ball there, get the ball to target there. And I'm a lot more around, yeah, but how do you get the ball to target? So with DP and with my own game, we were always working on like drift of ball and shape of ball and, the wrapping up of the ball. And that's what I feel like a lot of people are perhaps missing, that I maybe didn't even really understand myself, that Shabini is unbelievable at it. And you don't see it until you're on court and you feel it, whether the ball's always drawing away from you. And it's like she's playing chess. She's just maneuvering you a tiny bit out of position every single time until it just is too far away. And a lot of players would have said to me when I was playing, like, oh, I knew you were good, but I thought I had a chance. I thought I had a chance, really. And then you get on there and it's the quality of the ball. It's the ball dipping into the back rather than sitting up out of the back. And the drop shots sort of going, the men are amazing at it. It can be that high on the front wall, but stay so short and so tight. And the margin for error and understanding how you get the ball where it is. And I think also, like, one last thing to sort of say as well on the mental side is, the efficiency of movement and being able to stick to a tactical plan is massively linked to the mental side. So if you're rubbish physically, I don't care how strong you are mentally, because as soon as you get tired, your mind goes. It gets drawn away into like the pain, the tiredness. How am I going to carry on for another 2 games? They're too good. I can't get in front of them. Before you know it, you're thinking all sorts of mess. And that there's no amount of mental work going to fix that. That simply comes down to getting fitter. And the more fit you are, the more you can concentrate on what it is you're trying to do on the court. Because if you can't think about what you're doing on the court, you can't do what you're trying to do on the court. So I spoke to a psychologist once who watched me play Nicole, early 20s, and he said, you haven't got a mental issue, you've got a physical issue.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can't deal with Nicole's physicality. Until you can deal with her physicality, then you can have a go at trying to win. And it was like the big, again, honesty. It was like, I didn't want to hear that at the time. I'm like, no, I'm not beating Nicole because there's a mental issue. I've got she's always beaten me. I've never beaten her. It's a mental issue. And then you look into it, you're like, yeah, of course I'm not fit enough. She's extended the rally length of the women's game by like 4 or 5 shots a rally, every rally. I can't deal with it. And we get to like 1-all and 6-all and I fall off a cliff. It's not a mental issue, it's a physical issue. So I think a lot of my mental strength came from movement efficiency, working on fitness, and being able to sort of, keep mentally strong when I was tired.
Yeah, that mind-body connection, they feed off each other. I think they both fuel for each other. It's like you're just adding more gasoline to that fire. The body gets better, and the mentally you find this confidence level. Oh, confidence is good. Actually, you know what? I'm going to maybe train a bit harder or do stuff I've never done before. And yeah, I love that idea when you can get them working in synergy. And very finally, you told me that, and I've seen on your Instagram, and I'm sure a lot of your followers have, you're in a interesting process in your personal life, recording an audiobook at the moment. So yeah, I'm curious to know what's next for you, what's coming up. Obviously, COVID is getting in the way, but can you expand what's happening in your own personal life? And yeah, really interested about your book.
Yeah, just kind of, setting out on my way coaching. It's been great. I feel like I've got a bit of a step on each rung of a ladder, because I'm sort of just coaching out of my David Lloyd club, which is really nice. Some of the members' kids and things like that. Involved in the Lancashire junior squash setup, so like county level, little bit of work for England squash, so like national level, and then working with a few pros privately. So it really keeps you honest. It keeps you having, Danny said to me when I started, some of the biggest coaching learnings that you'll sort of make are the ones where you've got to try and get a club player better, because they've got all these bad habits but they're super keen. And it's true. And trying to improve a club player makes almost improving pros like easy, because they get it so quickly. Most pros just get it. So it's education and trying to educate myself around coaching and taking what I learned on tour. And I'm also working for Head as their pro player consultant, which is brilliant. So getting to know the marketing side a little bit more, having a look at contracts, trying to recruit players. Just exciting stuff. And they were so supportive of me as a player, and a brilliant company and big company. So I'm excited to still be involved with them. And yeah, the book, sort of wanted to write a book for years. Obviously it made sense when I retired, and then it's pretty much ready. It's just COVID and wanting to promote it and wanting to get it out there. And, I'm not a celebrity that's going to sell the book itself, so I'm going to have to do a bit of promotion around it. So I want to wait till the right time. And luckily, the publishers that I'm involved with are mainly music production. So it's the first book they're going to have ever done, which is exciting. But because of the music side, they've got loads of sound studios, and we've been in doing the audiobook. So the brilliant thing about the audiobook is that it's going to have guest chapters. The book's got guest chapters rather, and each chapter is going to be read by the person themselves in the audiobook, which is a great addition. And then at the end of each chapter, we'll have a little Q&A with that person. So it's a little bit of a nice addition to the paperback, or we're not quite sure paperback, hardback yet. But that obviously won't be in the full book, but you'll get pictures in the full book. So I kind of wanted something on both sides. And yeah, just waiting for the right time to release that. Hopefully, COVID permitting, kind of maybe around the British Open. Before the British Open, obviously, I don't want to kind of, be doing too much around people playing in the British Open, but
Of course.
with the right sort of timing, a couple of weeks before, and then maybe sell a few copies and sign some stuff at the British Open. And I'd love to do it there where I had so much success and so much fond memories as well. So kind of sat on it at the moment.
Are you allowed to say what the title is and what the book is about? A bit more detail on that, or is it all clandestine at the moment?
No, I think so. I think so. So the title's going to be All In, which just, I mean, everything we've spoken about today is,
Pretty much.
yeah, like, kind of was and am all in with everything that I do. And I actually wanted to call it Find a Way because Jade used to call me like Laura Find a Way because I used to find a way when I didn't have, didn't have the right to. But I read such an amazing book by Diana Nyad. It was called Find a Way, and
Right.
I took that title out of it really. But that's a great book for anyone who wants to you want to work on the mental side. I know I'm going on a bit here, but there's several books that I can recommend if you want to like
Please
figure
do.
out.
Honestly, I love book podcast recommendations. So yeah, anyone listening, please hit us with your best books you can
Yeah.
recommend.
Well, Diana Nyad was an unbelievable, like long distance ultra swimmer who had to deal with box jellyfish and sharks in some of the most dangerous waters and swimming for, I think, almost like 2 days, 3 days, dealing with cuts and saltwater rashes and things like that, and delirium and all of that. I mean, so you want to talk about mental strength and having been able to get through a squash match, read that and you realize that it's not that difficult. Tyler Hamilton's book, I don't know if you've read that, The Secret Race. I mean, that got me through a tournament. He basically ground down his back teeth. He was in so much pain getting through a race. I'm like, I've never ground my back teeth down, so I think I'm like, got a bit to go on the mental capacity.
Yep.
Chrissy Wellington, that won me like 2 tournaments. Reading that book, she basically Iron Man world champion, couldn't feel her legs at times. I'm like, literally, I can still feel my legs, I can still go. Relentless by Tim Grover was like just being a cleaner in your own right, and I think that won me the Macau Open one. I'm like, I'm a cleaner, I'm in it. Just brilliant. There's so many books, and actually so when talk about the book, that's the title, All In, and the book itself is just about my squash, mainly a little bit about my childhood. It links in great with the guest chapters, of which kind of Mark, DP, Jade, Caroline, fasciotherapist, Danny, Peter McNabb, who have spoken a lot about. All of these different people are going to come together. They offer a different light, and then within the book as well, talk about some of the training that I do, and a lot of the dynamic of getting over and trying to beat Nicole and the challenge that provided, and then dealing with the Egyptians, and from there, and some stories hopefully about what it was like away from the court at tournaments. And also at the end, I want to actually, just touching on the book thing, like provide a list of all of the books that I've read, because I think it's so, when I wrote them all down, just sporting books that are associated with getting my squash better, over 100 books for my career. So there's a lot out there. Some are spiritual, some are sports psychology, some are autobiographies, but we're not including novels or anything there. We're just talking books that I've read to get my game better. So that's all going to be in there as well.
Presence, process, persistence, the essence of Squash Mind.